if you build them offshore, your wind farms offshore, then you are most likely to be able to produce the maximum amount of power out from them because the wind blows more regularly offshore. The disadvantage of offshore is that you're a long way from connecting to the grid. I know that you've shown some pictures of offshore wind farms, but actually having gone and had a look at them, they are not unattractive things at all. They don't look particularly obtrusive, but as I say, they are pretty expensive to build. You've got to drill down into the seabed and you've got to build that connection to the grid. As to how much does each of them produce, well, it depends upon the size. But I suppose in broad terms, you need quite a lot of those turbines to produce a relatively small amount of electricity, which is why we're building quite so many wind farms in order to provide us with some, well, as much as possible as we can of renewable electricity in that form. If you bring your wind farm onshore, well, first of all, it's cheaper to build because, you know, you can get it into the ground much more easily and you're closer to the grid. But the issue here is people. And if you're going to build onshore wind farms, then what you need to do is you need to find somewhere which, again, is sufficiently exposed. So you're going to catch as much wind as possible, but if possible, is as far away from people's homes, as people do find them rather intrusive. As you rightly say, not many people want to live next door to one of those, but if it's a reasonable distance away, then it's a different kettle of fish.
Impact then if you have, say, one in the sea to the environment around you and one on land to the environment around you, so the actual ecosystem, how damaging is it?
How damaging in what respect? To build it?
Well, if you're putting
to the environment generally?
Yeah, the environment, does it damage, you know, because it must use a lot of land underneath it and you know, it must damage the seabed, surely.
There's been some concerns and there's been quite a lot of studies. One of the main concerns actually was not directly environmental. It was whether the wind farm would interfere with radar, you know, that ships use. And I think they've more or less solved that one. On the environmental, the studies that I've seen did very intensive environmental investigation on plankton, on fish, on, as you rightly say, what you're doing to the seabed. But I think we've got to recognise, like anything to do with industry, it's not free of environmental impact. You can minimise your environmental impact, you can choose your location appropriately, but these will have an environmental impact. Energy is expensive to build whatever it is that you need to build to produce it. It's expensive for nuclear, it's expensive for wind, it's expensive for solar. It's quite intrusive because these are big installations, again, whether they're wind or whether they're nuclear, but we do need energy. We are a society and economy that requires electricity. And that means that governments have not got to just make short-term decisions, but have got to make long-term decisions. And whilst I'm entirely in favour of doing what we can by using renewables, we also have to recognise that reliable backup is essential as well. You can't do one without the other.
Right, and your backup would be what? Fossil fuel?
Well, again, you've got some choices. You can have fossil fuel backup, of which gas is the least polluting, and you can have nuclear backup, which is less polluting, of course, because it's not a hydrocarbon, so it's less polluting than gas. It's more expensive to build. I suspect the government is going to back the small-scale nuclear power reactors of the sort that I gather that Elon Musk has got some interest in this. And, of course, Rolls-Royce has been doing a lot of research on, and Rolls-Royce makes small nuclear reactors anyway. I don't mean, you know, for other uses. And the thing about that...
I just want to ask you one last question very briefly, because we're coming up to the news. And what about the storage of the energy from wind farms? Does it make a lot of energy, and is it easy to store?
No, electricity is not easy to store in any way. You can store some of it in batteries, but that's relatively short term. One of the longer term ideas is that you use the surplus power, when we're not switching our lights on, but the wind is still blowing, to electrolyze water, produce hydrogen, and then you put hydrogen to replace some of the gas in the gas grid, or something along those lines. The technology isn't there. The ideas are good. The only way that you can actually deal with your renewables is by, build more renewables by all means, but by having that backup as well. Gas for the interim, nuclear for the long term, I think is the best way.